We will use the sentence builder in order to form a story opening. Right below here is a picture of a completed story opening using the SC Arrow secret formula, the parts of speech cards, as well as the icon bar and the post-its to generate different parts of that sentence. Follow along using the steps to create a story opening. After you watch this story opening video, I have an activity that you can teach your students in order to write more cohesive sentences that transition from one action to the next action in your stories using the secret formula TC Arrow. Please watch first the story opening video, then continue on to see how you can use this same sentence builder chart for your narrative writing to write transition sentences. Are you writing narratives with your kids? Well, today we're going to have a video so that you can help them write a first sentence to their story that's called a story opening. This story opening is going to help them create great stories and begin their stories with a sophisticated sentence. To write that story opening, we're going to use the sentence builder. Now, the sentence builder requires 5 steps to write a story opening. Let's start with step 1. Step 1. Secret formula time. This is a fabulous way to help kids learn how to write a story opening. We're going to give them a secret formula. Here's our secret formula for a story opening. It's S, C, arrow. I always have the kids go, what does that mean? The first letter, which is an S, stands for setting. S is setting. Setting tells us, and then we point to our wrist, when and where. What does setting tell us? When and where. The next letter is a C. C is character. Who's in our story? A person or an animal? The last card is an arrow. That means action. What's the character doing? SC arrow. Setting, character, action. Now we're ready for step 2. Step 2, parts of speech cards. We're going to add the parts of speech in these little dotted boxes so that when kids are writing these sentences, they know SC arrow, S stands for setting. What does setting tell us? When and where. So we're going to add a when, and we're going to add a where card. C is character. Who's in the story? A person or an animal? Well, a person or an animal, that would be a noun. So we're going to add a noun card here. And then action. What's the character doing? That would be a verb. And finally, we're going to add the last card here, and that will be an adjective because we need to describe our character in the story also. We have step 2. Step 1 was the secret formula. Step 2 is our parts of speech card. Let's head to step 3. Step 3, the icon bar. Draw simple pictures to represent our story opening. So let me show you what you do. You don't go from left to right. So far we've gone left to right when we've added our secret formula, when we've added our parts of speech card, but when we're actually planning what our story sentence is going to be about, we have to go in a specific order so it makes sense to the kids. Our first card that we go to is the noun. Underneath the noun, in this icon box, we're going to draw simple pictures to represent what's going on in our story opening sentence. So we go to the noun and we say, noun, who is in our story? A person or an animal? So we may ask the kids, we may pick a child's name, they give us a person or an animal for our story. Let's say that we chose a rabbit. All we do is draw a simple picture to represent the rabbit here. It's not anything detailed, it's a fast sketch. After the noun, then what we're going to do is we're going to jump to the setting, the when and where cards. Why? I don't jump to the verb, the action where the rabbit is going to do something, because I don't know what the rabbit would do if I don't know where the rabbit is. So we're going to add a setting, and then it's going to make the action make more sense in our story. So when is our story happening? Let's have it happen in the morning. So we'll put a little sun, like the sun's coming up. Where's the story happening? Well, where would the bunny be? Let's have him out in the wilderness or in the woods, so we'll put some hills and some trees here. Again, notice I'm just drawing simple icons for the meaning of the sentence. That's all I'm doing. Let's go back and read the pictures in our sentence. One morning, in the wilderness, a bunny. Action. What's the bunny doing at the beginning of the story? We're going to add the action to our verb card. Our verb needs to make sense. So I always ask the kids, we're at the beginning of our story. It's morning time, it's the wilderness, we have our bunny. What's the bunny doing early in the morning in the wilderness? What would make sense? So we would have the kids brainstorm with each other. Let's say we came up with the idea that maybe he's eating his breakfast, nibbling on some grass. So I'll draw some grass here, and then I'll put little lines like he's nibbling on the grass. We could add one more part to the sentence, so let's do it so we can make the sentence even more sophisticated. Let's add a Y card. Right underneath our arrow, we may have had an action, what the bunny's doing, but why is the bunny nibbling on the grass? So, why would the bunny be nibbling on the grass? Because he's hungry. Well, let's go ahead and let's put the bunny here again. Again, remember, I'm not worried about it being an art project. It's just fast sketch. But let me go ahead and put lines around the bunny's belly to show that the bunny is hungry. We have our planned out sentence in the icon bar. We have one morning in the wilderness, a bunny was nibbling on some grass because he was hungry. Before I go on to step 4, I want to make sure that my story is complete. That explains why I have color coding on these cards. If you notice, I have green, yellow, and red, just like a stoplight. What we do is we always go to our red cards to check if we have a complete sentence. So we go red light stop. Do we have our noun and verb phrases, and do they make sense, our subject and predicate? So we're going to look over here and say, the bunny was nibbling on some grass. Yes, that does make sense. Now we're going to say, caution, caution. Did you use describing words? So we're going to go underneath our adjective. No, we didn't use the describing words yet, and that's because we're going to wait until step 4 to add our describing words. But it's there to remind us when we go to step 4. Let's go to the green light. Green light means go. And that could mean go, does this information need to go in a sentence, or does it need to leave? Or can I move it around in a sentence? So let's see. When is the story happening? Early one morning. Do we need to know that information? Yes. Out in the wilderness? Yes. Why? Why was he nibbling on the grass? Because he was hungry. His belly was rumbling. Okay, I think we need to keep that also. We have all of our cards. Red light stop. Does the sentence make sense? Yellow light caution. Slow down. Do you have describing words? Green light go. Does that need to stay in the sentence or does it need to leave? Let's go to step 4. We're going to add our sticky notes. I'm going to go ahead and write information on sticky notes and put them down in this bottom area. Why am I going to do this? I'm going to be able to make a more sophisticated sentence if I can add these sticky notes. How do I know what sticky notes to write and where to write them? That's why the parts of speech cards come in. When we have the parts of speech, they're here so that kids can identify specific words or phrases in a sentence so that they can add or change them to make their sentence writing more sophisticated. That's the purpose for a part of speech. If I look for the when phrase, then I know, okay, how did I say this? One morning. I'm going to isolate that part of the sentence and figure out how could I say that in a better way? How could I add other words or change it so it sounds even better? So we'll brainstorm with the kids to come up with another way to say one morning. Then we'll write them on little sticky cards. I like to make sure the sticky cards match the parts of speech cards so the kids can see how they connect. Maybe we came up with, instead of early one morning, we came up with one lovely morning. So we have one lovely morning, early in the morning, or as the sun rose brightly. We'll have many different ways that you could say one morning. We came up with these. Notice I'm going from left to right. Every single step is from left to right except for when I planned the sentence. We went from one morning, now we're going to go to in the wilderness. What's a better way to say in the wilderness? Notice how much easier it is to make a sentence more sophisticated when you isolate just these parts. Maybe out in the country, in the woods, deep in the forest. We have 3 different ways that we're saying in the wilderness. We have our when and our where. Now we're going to go to our next parts of speech card and we have our adjectives. So we're going to ask, what kind of bunny is it? Kids have a tough time using adjectives that make sense in a sentence. We know the bunny is eating grass and the bunny's belly is rumbling because he's hungry. So what kind of bunny would be eating grass and having a belly that is rumbling? What kind of bunny a famished bunny, tiny bunny, a skinny little bunny. We have our when cards, our where, our adjectives. We don't need any nouns because we already know it's a bunny. We're going to our verbs. We're going to add a phrase that goes with the verb. We're going to talk about how the bunny, what did the bunny do? He ate some grass. Now notice, I'm saying this in the past tense because most stories are written in the past tense. So we want our kids to start right off in that past tense. The bunny ate some grass. Let's go ahead and add some other words that could mean that he ate grass. Remember, we always want to put them in the past tense because most stories are written in the past tense. So we came up with dined on a breakfast of greens, nibbled on some lush grass, gobbled down some juicy grass. Again, I'm just putting those ideas underneath the verb card. We're putting a squiggly line underneath the verb so that we understand that's the verb and our predicate phrase here. We added a why card here because we wanted to make our sentence a little more sophisticated and we wanted to explain why the bunny was nibbling on grass at the beginning of our story. So, why was the bunny dining on that breakfast of greens? To quiet the deep roar of her hunger, to satisfy her hunger, to fill her empty belly. We've isolated that part of the sentence, came up with more sophisticated ways to say that phrase, and we're adding all those different brainstorm parts to our sticky note section. We have step 1, secret formula time. Step 2, parts of speech. Step 3, we have our icons in our plan a story bar. And then we have our step 4, brainstorm the different parts of the sentence. We're ready for step 5, move the sticky notes. This is where we're going to take all these different sticky notes that we brainstormed the different parts of the sentence on, and we're going to move them in the planning bar so that we can create different sentences about the bunny eating grass in the morning. How about we put one lovely morning, deep in the forest, a famished bunny dined on a breakfast of greens to satisfy her hunger. We have that sentence so the kids can see by brainstorming the different parts of a sentence, they made an even more exciting sentence, an exciting story opening from where they started from a simple sentence to a more exciting one. We can show the kids, let's make another dynamic, wonderful sentence by moving these sticky notes. How about, as the sun rose brightly, deep in the forest, a skinny little bunny gobbled down some juicy grass to quiet the deep roar of her hunger. What a great sentence. They can change all these cards. There's many different sentences that they can create. And then what I usually do is I have my class start with that one sentence and then we work on the rest of the story. Let's review. We had 5 steps for our sentence builder. Step 1, secret formula time. SC arrow, setting character action. Step 2, parts of speech cards. Add the parts of speech that represent each part of our secret formula. Setting, when, where. Character, noun, who is in our story, person or an animal. Then we're adding an adjective because we should describe our noun. And then action, we're adding our verb card. What's our character doing at the beginning of the story? We even went back and added a why to make our opening a little bit more sophisticated to explain why they were doing this action. Next, we went to step 3 where we had our planning bar where we planned out the story. Remember, this was the only time we didn't move from left to right in the sentence. We used the parts of speech cards so that we could plan out each part of the sentence. That's why we want to use those parts of speech cards so kids can start to chunk sentence parts to create their sentences and then lead us into step 4, which is the sticky note time, where we're going to use those different chunks of a sentence to brainstorm better ways to say them. And then finally we went to step 5, where we moved the sticky notes. We took a sticky note from each one of our columns to create a more sophisticated and exciting story opening sentence. This is a great way to help your kids come up with an opening sentence to their narratives that they're ready to write. We're going to learn how to write a narrative transition sentence. I'm going to take our previous activity our story opening sentence, and we're going to build a transition sentence that will connect onto this. Step 1, secret formula time. We're going to add a secret formula up here on the top of our sentence builder. Remember, secret formulas are a great way for children to learn how to build sentences. Our secret formula for a transition sentence and a narrative is T, C, arrow. What does that mean? That means transition, character, action. Step 2, let's add our parts of speech cards. Remember, we add our parts of speech so that we can look at our sentences and chunk them into meaningful parts. The first part of our sentence is going to be transition. We're going to add our transition cards here because we're going to begin our sentence with a transition. Our C is for character. Our character is a noun, so we're going to put a noun underneath our C card. And of course, we probably need to describe our noun, so we should add an adjective in front of it. And then the arrow is for action. So we'll add a verb underneath our arrow. We have our first step, our secret formula, TC arrow, transition, character, action. Our second step was parts of speech. So we added our cards so that we could break our sentence down into tiny units so that later we could brainstorm and come up with a really sophisticated transitional sentence. Our parts of speech cards were the terrific transition card, adjectives, nouns, and verbs. Step 3, plan the sentence. We need to plan our transition sentence. What information is going to be in there? Well, when you're writing a story, there's a couple of things that you need to do. You need to say to the children, what was our previous sentence? It was about the bunny eating grass out in the wilderness because she was hungry. Now we need to go to our next sentence. So when we plan this next sentence, what we need to say is, what happened next while the bunny was eating the grass? Or what happened next after the bunny was eating the grass? You're either going to have a next action while the bunny is eating or after it eats. So let's have the bunny continue eating and say, what happened next while the bunny was eating the grass? We have to figure out what's going to happen next in our story, and it has to be interesting. Sometimes it's hard for kids to do that. It's hard for them to come up with ideas. So what I like to do is I like to show them emotions. Let's decide on an emotion for our students. Emotions are what happens in stories. Characters have emotions because things happen to them. So let's look at our emotion bar. Maybe something could happen to make the bunny laugh or to make the bunny sad or scared. Let's make something happen that scares the bunny. We know that we're going to decide what happened next while the bunny was eating grass, and we know that whatever happened next, that the bunny was frightened by it. So let's go to our planning bar and decide that. What happened next that frightened the bunny? Well, who or what frightened the bunny? Let's have a bear frighten them. So we'll put a bear here. Again, draw a simple picture to represent whatever it is that you're writing about. So we're going to write a bear. We're going to draw a bear. Maybe I'll make him look kind of mean and angry. So we have a bear in our picture. Now we're going to go over to our action. What did the bear do that caused the bunny to become frightened? So maybe what we could do is say the bear tried to attack the bunny or lunged at the bunny. So let's put some arrows, and then we show the little bunny here. Oh no, I'm being attacked. What we have is we planned who or what our character is, a bear. And what did the bear do? The bear attacked the bunny. Notice I didn't put anything in with the adjectives or underneath the transition cards because we'll add that information in step 4 when we add the sticky notes. All you're doing here is putting the character and the action. Step 4, add the sticky cards. We went from left to right on our secret formula, left to right on our cards. We filled in character and action on our planning bar. Now we're going all the way from left to right to fill in our sticky notes. Many times when we write transitions, it's difficult for students to come up with some ideas. If you always make it more of a meaningful concept, it helps them. In other words, if I want to transition to this sentence, I need to ask, Did some time go by? Was it a very little amount of time? Did the bunny change a location? Are they somewhere else? If so, then maybe I could have a time transition, like maybe a very little amount of time went by, so suddenly, or after a while, or maybe I'm giving a location transition from out of nowhere, from behind a bush, so then I can transition to the sentence to say that a bear attacked him. Or I could have a sound effect. Stomp, stomp, roar, roar. And then I could go into how the bunny was attacked by the bear. A transition in a narrative many times that works really well are going to be either a when, a where, or a sound effect. And there's others too, but those are pretty popular and very useful because stories go through time and change locations. Let's go ahead and add our transitions. Over here in our transition card, we have a where transition. From out of nowhere. So the bear came from out of nowhere. So now we're transitioning and saying from out of nowhere. Or maybe suddenly. Ooh, that tells us, wow, this just happened suddenly and it's kind of scary. Or we could also add, what's the bunny doing? So as the bunny devoured her tasty treat, a bear attacked her. Let's go to our adjectives. What kind of bear? Remember, you always want to ask kids, what kind of bear would attack a bunny? Do you need to say what the bear looks like, how the bear feels, what kind of emotion words could I use, or 5 senses words can I use? And I write down some ideas the kids come up with, and we post them underneath our adjective card. We have a loud and annoying bear, a big fat bear, a devilish bear. We have our transitions, our adjectives. We don't need to add any noun cards because we know that it's a bear. We're ready to write our verb, and we're actually going to write our verb phrase on our Post-its, our little sticky notes, and we're going to place them here on our board. Before we do that, let's remember what our past sentence was. Our previous sentence was, as the sun rose brightly out in the country, a famished bunny dined on a breakfast of greens to quiet the deep roar of her hunger. Don't forget bunny there. We're ready to have the action in our sentence. A loud and annoying bear, action. What did the bear do? The bear swooped down at the bunny. Right at that point, when we come up with that idea, I put my hand up and I go, woo, 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 redundant please, redundant please. Good writers don't keep repeating the same important words. If I said bunny in the first sentence, I probably want to change that. And I could use a synonym or a phrase. I could use a pronoun. In this case, why don't we change this? Instead of swoop down on the bunny, why don't we say swoop down on the surprised creature? So we've replaced creature for bunny. We have swoop down on the surprised creature. So we got rid of the redundant please, but let's go ahead and make sure that we underline our verb, just so that we recognize that's the verb in this phrase. Let's add some of our other ideas for the bunny being attacked by the bear. Swoop down on the surprised creature. How about darted? Darted towards the timid creature. Or attacked the tiny rabbit. In the previous sentence, we said bunny. This sentence will say rabbit. Let's go ahead and see how this looks. From out of nowhere, a loud and annoying bear swooped down on the surprised creature. What a wonderful sentence. Let's try another one. Suddenly, a big fat bear attacked the tiny rabbit. Notice how this is creating a much more sophisticated sentence. Students can change the cards, move them around so that they can create their own sentence. Both lessons, when we learned how to write the story opening, SC arrow, setting character action, and this lesson, TC arrow, transition character action, can be used as mini lessons to show children how to write better sentences for their story. You wouldn't use this tool for every sentence in their story. Instead, it's a tool to teach them how to write better sentences in their own stories and to learn these secret formulas. After using the sentence builder to write a transition sentence for your narrative, it's a good idea to go over to your paper and add that sentence. The reason why is sometimes when we do these isolated activities, kids don't connect it to their own writing. So if I show them, here was my story opening, my first sentence, as the sun rose brightly out in the country, a famished bunny dined on a breakfast of greens to quiet the deep roar of her hunger. Suddenly, a big fat bear attacked the tiny rabbit. They can see how this connected with my story and how I used it in my story instead of thinking it was an isolated activity. It's a great idea to connect it to your own writing so they see how these lessons apply to their own writing.